Service Teardown, HP EliteDesk 705G5 Desktop Mini. How to replace the access panel.
Removal. Slide the access panel latch left to the unlocked position. Grasp the handle on the rear of the access panel, slide it back. Lift and remove the panel from the unit. Replacement. Ensuring the tabs on the access panel are aligned with the slots in the chassis, lower the panel onto the chassis. Slide the access panel forward until the latch snaps into place.
How to replace the front bezel.
Before you begin, remove the access panel. Removal. Pull up on the 4 tabs on the front bezel and rotate the bezel away from the chassis. Lift and remove the front bezel. Replacement. Align the hooked tabs on the front bezel with the slots in the chassis. Rotate the bezel up against the chassis and press firmly until the tabs snap into place.
How to replace the PCI parallel port card.
Before you begin, remove the access panel. Removal. Rotate open the slot cover retention latch. Grasp the PCI parallel port card firmly and lift it off of the system board. Replacement. Lower the PCI parallel port into the chassis and align it with the expansion slot. Press the PCI parallel port down, securing it into place. Rotate the slot cover retention latch closed.
How to replace the hard drive bracket.
Before you begin, remove the access panel, optical drive, and front bezel. Removal. Disconnect the power and SATA cables connected to the hard drive. Press the release tab on the hard drive cage. Slide the hard drive bracket out of the channels on the hard drive cage. Lift and remove the hard drive bracket from the hard drive cage. Replacement. With the release tab on the hard drive cage pressed, align the tabs on the hard drive bracket with the slots in the hard drive cage. Slide the hard drive cage forward until it snaps into place. Reconnect the power and SATA cables to the hard drive.
How to replace the SD card reader.
Before you begin, remove the access panel, optical drive, front bezel, and drive cage. Removal. Disconnect the SD card reader cable from the system board. Remove the Torx T15 screw that secures the SD card reader to the chassis. Grasp the SD card reader and remove it from the chassis. Replacement. Lower the SD card reader into the unit and align it with the cutout in the chassis. Replace the Torx T15 screw that secures the SD card reader to the chassis. Reconnect the SD card reader cable to the system board.
How to replace the motherboard.
Before you begin, remove the access panel, optical drive, drive cage, SD card reader, front EMI bracket, wireless LAN board, memory, expansion or graphics cards if installed, fan duct, option board if installed, heatsink, and processor. Removal. Disconnect all cables connected to the motherboard, noting their place for reinstallation. Remove the 8 Torx T15 screws that secure the motherboard to the chassis. Tilt the front edge of the motherboard up. Lift and remove the motherboard from the chassis. Replacement. At an angle, lower the system board into the chassis and align the rear I/O panel with the cutouts in the chassis. Lower the system board into place, ensuring the screw holes are aligned. Replace the 8 Torx T15 screws to secure the motherboard to the chassis. Reconnect all cables to the motherboard.
How to replace the CPU. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, drives cage, fan duct, and heatsink. Removal.
Press down to release the CPU load lever from its retention tab, and pull the load lever and load plate away from the socket. Identify pin 1 on the socket by the mark on the corner of the socket stencil. Line up the pin 1 corner of the Intel CPU removal replacement tool over the socket. Press down on the plunger of the removal tool to pick up the CPU from the socket and remove the tool and the CPU from the motherboard.
Replacement.
To replace the CPU, first identify pin 1 position on the microprocessor by noting the yellow mark on the corner of the chip assembly. Make sure the Intel CPU staging tool side pins are set to the correct socket type for the CPU. For this unit, it is LGA1151. Place the CPU into the Intel CPU staging tool. When correctly inserted, the small notches on the side of the CPU should align over the side pins on the staging tool. Place the removal replacement tool over the stage, lining up the pin 1 triangles on each tool. Press down on the removal replacement tool to pick the CPU up from the stage. Align the removal replacement tool again to pin 1 on the motherboard CPU socket. Press the plunger on the removal replacement tool to release the CPU into the socket. Swing the load plate down. Lock the load lever under its retaining tab to secure the microprocessor into place.
How to replace the drives cage. Before you begin, remove the access panel and the front bezel. Removal.
Detach the connectors from the hard drive and the optical drive in the cage. Press on the side latch for the drives cage. Swing up the left side of the cage, feeding the hard drive connectors down through their access hole on the cage. Lift the right side of the cage off of the unit. The drives cage has a large and small tab on the right side that fit into slots on the PC. The drives cage also has a tab and a latch on the left side that fit into a slot and over a tab on the left side of the PC.
Replacement.
To replace the drives cage, insert the tabs on the right side of the cage into their slots. Swing the left side of the drive cage down, pulling the hard drive connectors up through their access hole until the latch on the left side fits over its tab. Replace the connectors to the hard drive and optical drive.
How to replace the expansion card. Before you begin, remove the access panel. Removal.
Lift the latch for the expansion card's retaining bracket and swing the bracket out. Press on the latch for the PCI x16 slot on the motherboard if removing a card from the PCI x16 slot. Carefully pull out the expansion card.
Replacement.
To replace an expansion card, carefully align and push the card into its slot on the motherboard until it is fully seated. Rotate the expansion card's retaining bracket back into place to secure the card.
How to replace the fan duct. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and drives cage. Removal.
Free the hood sensor cable from its cable guides on the fan duct. Free the power supply connector from the cable guides on the side and top of the fan duct. Pull out on the 2 retaining tabs for the fan duct and pull the fan duct out of the PC.
Replacement.
There are 2 small ledges on the inside of the fan duct that rest under the top edge of the heatsink. To replace the fan duct, align the fan duct approximately into place. Pull out on the retaining tabs for the fan duct and press the fan duct down until the tabs snap into place over the edge of the heatsink. Replace the power supply connector into the cable guides on the side and top of the fan duct. Route the hood sensor cable back into its guides on the fan duct.
How to replace the hard drive. Before you begin, remove the access panel and the front bezel. Removal.
Detach the power and data connectors from the hard drive. Pull out on the metal drive release latch, slide the hard drive or drive tray toward the side of the unit, and lift the drive out of the unit.
Replacement.
If replacing a 3.5-inch hard drive, detach the 4 shock-mounted Torx 15 screws on the sides of the hard drive and reserve. If replacing a 2.5-inch drive, detach the 4 Torx 15 screws that secure the drive to the drive tray and pull the tray off of the hard drive. To install a new 3.5-inch hard drive, attach the 4 reserved shock-mounted Torx 15 guide screws to the sides of the hard drive. To install a new 2.5-inch hard drive, place the drive into its tray and secure with 4 Torx 15 screws. The 4 side screws on the hard drive, or hard drive tray, align into slots on the drive's cage. When replacing the hard drive or drive tray, align the screws of the drive into their slots, then slide the drive towards the center of the unit. Replace the power and data connectors to the hard drive.
How to replace the heatsink. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, drives cage, and fan duct. Removal.
Detach the heatsink connector to the motherboard. Loosen the 4 captured Torx 15 screws for the heatsink, and gently pull the heatsink out of the PC.
Replacement.
Before replacing the heatsink into the system, first clean off the old thermal grease from the microprocessor. Clean the grease from the heatsink if you are replacing the same heatsink into the system. Apply new thermal grease or a thermal pad to the microprocessor. Align the 4 screws of the heatsink over the 4 screw holes on the motherboard. Tighten the 4 Torx 15 heatsink screws. Replace the heatsink connector to the motherboard.
How to replace the optical drive. Before you begin, remove the access panel. Removal.
Detach the power and data cables from the optical drive. Press on the green drive release latch at the rear of the drive and slide the drive out the front of the unit. If you are installing a new optical drive, pull the green drive release latch off of the optical drive. Insert a straightened paper clip, or other similar tool, into the forced eject hole on the optical drive to eject the drive tray. Pry and push out on the tabs securing the bezel to the optical drive, and remove the bezel from the drive.
Replacement.
The optical drive bezel has several tabs that fit into slots on the front of the optical drive. To install a new optical drive, press the old optical drive bezel onto the optical drive until the tabs are secured. There are 2 small pins on the green drive release latch that fit into 2 small holes on the side of the optical drive. press the pins into their holes to secure the latch to the new optical drive. Slide the drive into its drive bay through the front of the PC until the green release latch snaps into place. Replace the power and data connectors to the rear of the drive.
How to replace the option board. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, drives cage, and the fan duct. Removal.
Detach the two Phillips No. 1 screws securing the board to the motherboard. Pry the board up off the motherboard and remove it from the unit. There is a connector on the option board that fits over a connector on the motherboard.
Replacement.
To replace an option board, press the connector edges together. Secure the option board to the motherboard with its two Phillips No. 1 screws.
How to replace the power supply. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and drives cage. Removal.
Free the power supply connector from the guides on the fan duct. Detach all power supply connectors to the motherboard. Free the power supply connectors from the cable guide near the power supply. Detach the 4 Torx 15 screws that connect the power supply to the PC. Press the latch at the inside edge of the power supply in the unit and slide the power supply into the PC before fully removing it from the unit.
Replacement.
There is a slot on the side of the power supply that slides over a large tab on the side wall of the chassis. To replace the power supply, align the power supply slot slightly behind the chassis tab, then slide the power supply back until it locks into place next to the latch. Reattach the 4 Torx 15 screws at the rear of the chassis to secure the power supply to the chassis. Replace the power supply connectors into their cable guide on the chassis wall. Reconnect all power supply connectors to the motherboard. Secure the far side power connector into its cable guides on the fan duct.
How to restore CMOS to factory settings. Before you begin, remove the access panel. Removal.
CMOS factory settings should be restored as a first step before replacing the system motherboard. Remove the battery from the motherboard. Wait 30 seconds.
Replacement.
Replace the battery to the motherboard. CMOS factory settings are now reset. Note that you will now need to enter System BIOS and reset the clock in BIOS after this procedure.
How to replace the speaker. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and drives cage. Removal.
Detach the speaker connector to the motherboard. Free the speaker connector from the cable guide on the bottom of the PC. Remove the single Phillips No. 1 screw at the front of the PC that secures the speaker to the front of the PC. Slide the speaker to the side and pull the speaker out of the unit.
Replacement.
There are small metal guides on the front inside of the PC for correct alignment of the speaker. To replace the speaker, slide the speaker into its guides, aligning the screw hole on the speaker with the screw hole on the chassis. Replace the Phillips No. 1 screw at the front of the unit to secure the speaker to the unit. Replace the speaker connector into its guide on the bottom of the chassis. Reconnect the speaker to the motherboard.
How to replace the system memory. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and drives cage. Removal.
Simultaneously push down on the clips on either side of the DDR4 DIMM socket to release the memory module. Carefully pull out the memory module. There is one notch on the bottom of every DDR4 DIMM module, offset from the center, that fits over a tab in the DDR4 DIMM memory socket.
Replacement.
When installing DDR4 DIMMs, align the notch on the module with the tab in the socket. Press the module into the socket until the clips on both sides of the socket lock into place.
How to replace the wireless LAN antennas. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and drives cage. Removal.
Carefully snap off the antennas from the wireless LAN board. Remove the rear antenna from the small cable tunnel next to the motherboard. Remove the rear antenna cable from the cable guide on the inside rear wall of the PC. Squeeze the bottom side tabs of the rear antenna cover to release the bottom of the cover and pull the cover off of the unit. Detach the Phillips No. 1 screw for the rear antenna. Pry the antenna off of the rear of the unit and pull its cable out the rear of the unit. Remove the front antenna from its cable guides on the front EMI bracket. Pull the front antenna cable out to the front of the unit through its access hole. Detach the Phillips No. 1 screw for the front antenna and pry the front antenna off of the unit. Each antenna has a small hole that fits over a small locator peg on the front or rear of the PC.
Replacement.
To replace the front antenna, align the hole on the antenna over its alignment peg and press the antenna adhesive onto the chassis. Secure the front antenna with its Phillips No. 1 screw. Pass the front antenna cable back into the unit through its access hole. Route the front antenna cable back into the cable guides on the front EMI bracket. Feed the rear antenna in through its access hole at the rear of the unit. Align its hole over its peg and press onto the chassis. Secure the rear antenna with its Phillips No. 1 screw. The rear antenna cover has two small hooked tabs on the bottom sides and two tabs on the top sides that fit into slots on the rear of the unit. To replace the cover, insert the two top tabs into their slots, then press the bottom of the cover until the bottom tabs have snapped into place. Replace the rear antenna into the cable guide on the rear inside wall of the PC. Align the rear antenna cable into the small cable tunnel next to the motherboard. Replace the antennas to the wireless LAN board. The antenna connectors are labeled 1 and 2 and should be connected to the corresponding 1 and 2 labeled ports on the wireless LAN board.
How to replace the wireless LAN board. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and drives cage. Removal.
Carefully snap off the antenna connectors from the wireless LAN board. Detach the Phillips number 1 screw securing the wireless LAN board in place. The board will pop up. Remove the board.
Replacement.
The wireless LAN board has a notch offset from the center that aligns over a key in its motherboard socket. To replace the wireless LAN board, angle the board into its motherboard socket at a 30-degree angle and press down. Hold it down while replacing the screw. Replace the antenna connectors to the board. The antenna connectors are labeled 1 and 2 and should be connected to the corresponding 1 and 2 labeled ports on the wireless LAN board.